Oh, hello. I think we're live. I'm behind my little logo here. That's no good. Focus Locus Presents. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Focus Locus Presents for this week. Tonight we have a very special presentation for you all. We have the Judgement, which is based on the short story by Franz Kafka. It is a psychological drama exploring themes of alienation, memory, and the lines between fantasy and reality that we all seem to live on these days. The film follows George Benderman, a young merchant living in 1900s Prague with his widowed father. And despite his success, George struggles to make up for wasted time by reconnecting with an estranged friend. However, as he confronts his circumstances, his situation turns for the worst in the most nonsensical of ways, to the point we are compelled to ask the question, the very nature of what we are seeing. To question the very nature of what we are seeing. Sorry, I wanted to read the entire, and then I got confused trying to remember exactly what it said, but Franz Kafka. Kafka-esque. So tonight we'll be joined by Connor Doyle, who wrote this adaptation and directed, and also is one of the actors in the performance. I won't give too much away. And a whole cast of cinematographers and a lot of names that we know at Northampton Open Media, in fact. But without further ado, I would like to present to you The Judgement, an adaptation of the Franz Kafka story by Connor Doyle through Hard Rhyme Productions. And put your existential questions in the chat. It was a joke I wrote down to say and then completely flubbed. We're having some technical issues tonight, folks, so excuse me while I flub my lines, but here's The Judgement.
Ah, Georg.
Good morning, Father. It's unbearably dark in here.
Yes, it's dark enough.
And you've closed the curtains as well.
I prefer it that way.
Well, it is a rather nice day. You should go out if you have the chance.
So, to what do I owe the pleasure?
Well, I only wanted to tell you that I'm sending the news of my engagement to St. Petersburg.
St. Petersburg?
Yes, to my friend there. You remember.
Ah, yes. Your friend.
Well, you know how I didn't want to tell him at first. Out of consideration for him, of course. You know how difficult he can be sometimes. I thought he'd find out by other means anyway, but I still wasn't going to tell him myself.
And you've changed your mind?
Yes, I've been thinking it over. You see, if he is my friend, then my happiness should make him happy as well, shouldn't it? So what is there to worry about? But before that... What is it, Father? Is there something wrong?
Georg, sit down.
What is it, Father?
Georg, you've come to ask my opinion about this. Of course, that does you right. But it's nothing. It's worse than nothing if you don't tell me the truth. I don't want to stir any conflicts. Since the death of your mother, certain things have been done questionably. Maybe there will be a time for mentioning them. I mean, there are many things in the business that I'm not aware of.
Father,
Let me finish. Perhaps whatever is going on might not be done directly behind my back, but I'm not equal to things anymore. My memory is failing. I know that. That's just the course of nature. And your mother. But at any rate, I need you to be honest with me. I know it's not important. It's hardly worth mentioning. But still, do you really have this friend in St. Petersburg?
Never mind my friends. 1,000 friends couldn't make up for you. I can't do without you in the business. You know that very well. But if it's going to undermine your health, I'm ready to close it down tomorrow forever.
Oh, come off it.
Please, Father. I know that won't do. But you need help. I'll call the doctor. We'll follow his orders. We can change rooms. You can move into my room, and I can move in here. But there's time for that later.
Georg, stop it. This is ridiculous. What's gotten into you? You keep going on about this friend from St. Petersburg as if he exists, as if I met him.
But Father, you have. Don't you remember? Think back a bit. It was 3 years since the last time he was here. The two of you got along quite well. Don't you remember his stories about the revolution? The riots in Kiev, the explosions, the priests, the cross.
No, enough of this. Don't try to turn this towards me, friend Petersburg, please. You've always been one for jokes, but now I'm tired of this game.
Game? Father, look at yourself. You sit all alone in this dark, musty old room, slouched in your armchair with your half-eaten breakfast on the table, with your little shrine to Mother. Do you know what I think? You haven't moved on. You're not taking enough care of yourself. And old age needs to be taken care of. I'll put you to bed now. For a little while. Here, let me get your things. If you'd rather go to my room right now, I can take you there. Would you prefer that? Father?
How can you have a friend there? It's impossible.
You'll be all right. You just need some sleep now. Here. Well, you should feel nice and snug now. Yes. You'll remember my friend soon enough. You just need some rest now.
Am I covered?
Everything will be fine, Father. I just need to step out for a moment. But I'll be back, I promise.
Am I covered?
It's all right, Father. Everything will be fine.
Am I covered?
Yes.
No, I am not. You wanted to cover me up, didn't you? Put the old man out to pasture while he's losing his wits, is that it? Well, I'll never let you cover me up. Even with the little strength I have, it's still enough for you. Of course I know your friend. He would have been a son after my own heart. Did you really think I had forgotten him? That I haven't felt sorry for him? I think about him all the time. Think about him endlessly wandering through the empty streets of St. Petersburg, tired, emaciated, alone. And that's why you've been deceiving him all this time, isn't it? That's why you lock yourself in your room, just so you can write your little fictions to Russia. But I can see through you like a sheet of glass. And just when you think you have him where you want him, my son decides he wants to get married.
attention to me.
It was because she lifted up her skirts, wasn't it? Wasn't it? Because she lifted them up like this and this for everyone to see, that disgusting whore. And because of that, you nuzzled up to her, fucked her. And through your worthless ambitions, you've disgraced your mother's memory, abandoned everyone who ever loved you. Oh, you think you could belittle us, bury us under the floorboards. Oh, but you would be mistaken. You've never amounted to anything, and even now fail in your half-wit schemes.
You're hysterical.
Hysterical? That's a good word. I'm going into hysterics. What else can I do? What else was left for me to do, huh? But tell me, now that you're speaking, what else was left for me in my back room while my big bad son strutted through life, finishing off the deals that I prepared for him, and then creeping away from me with closed face and shrugged shoulders? And why? Did you think that I didn't love you? You, my own flesh and blood?
No, stay back. I don't need you. I never needed you. You think you could withstand me? No, no, no. Don't be too sure. Perhaps at some other time. But your mother's spirit has guided me to this point and increased my strength tenfold. Yes, just take your bride in your arms and try getting in my way. I'll sweep her off her feet and throw you in the gutter. There I go, making jokes again, but my foolishness can never match up to yours.
So, you want to tell your friend about the engagement? He knows already, you stupid boy. He knows everything. I've been writing to him. You forgot to take my writing things from me. That's why he hasn't been here for years. He's abandoned you, just as you did him. He knows everything better than you do yourself. 1,000 times better.
Right. Of course he does. He knows it all. Of course.
Of course. But do you think I concern myself with anything else? You think I've been reading this all this time? Look!
It's 3 years old.
It's about time you faced facts. If only your mother could see you now, you pathetic piece of shit.
Your friend is going to pieces in Russia. Last time we heard from him, he was ill enough to be on his way to the morgue. And where were you when he was wasting his last breaths to cry out your name? Where were you? You were just as you are right now, tucked away in the corner with your hands covering your ears, all for your own amusement.
So you've been waiting for me this whole time?
You probably wanted to say that earlier, but now there's no use for it. So now you know what else there was in the world besides yourself. Till now you've cared for none other. An innocent child, maybe. But still more have you become a degenerate human being, and therefore I sentence you to death by drowning!
Hello, and we are live with Connor Doyle, director and writer of The Judgement, which you just watched. Say hello.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining us to talk about your film from 2016. This is the 6th year anniversary of the film. Is that right?
Yes, it will be 6th-year anniversary, I believe, on 24.
Wow.
Around that part, so might as well be.
Very exciting. So tell us about the beginning of this production. How did you come to start working on The Judgement?
Well, I first encountered the story during a hospice seminar during the spring semester of my third year at Hampshire College. I was assigned to present the story during the time, and I didn't really realize it until reading into it that I had glimpsed it years back. I guess I had just forgotten it. But one thing that really stuck out was from the story was George Benner, the protagonist, George Bennerman's full circumstance and the narration, how that kind of plays into it. One thing that really improved my work, or at least during that time, was the idea of the unreliable narrative and the viewer's relationship with narration in film, film prose, what have you. And what's intriguing about your story is how its trajectory changes and how circumstances are just so elusive throughout. From the beginning, you have a certain idea of what his life is, or at least that's what's presented to us. Because what's interesting, the narration seems, in its objectivity, almost seems too idealistic. You get a certain idea of York's family, York's work situation, his relationships with his friends and his fiancée, and they almost seem too perfect. And the fact that things are so inconsistent leads to question if they're actually real. And as we continue with the story, especially when we engage with the father character, that breaks down. Both the father is questioning whether York has a friend or not. And further on, when the father almost changes his whole mindset and then completely reverses, accuses York of sabotaging the whole family and conspiring against them and his friends, and that reverses for York's judgment. And what was interesting, with all that said, I had the interesting notion of what if this could be a psychological drama? Because whenever I read any, I'm always a very visual person. Whatever I read or interact with, and I was just really interested to see how this could be developed cinematically, because through didactic language, which is very descriptive. If you ever have read the story, it's very descriptive in York's state, in York's emotions, in the whole world that surrounds him. I was really interested how that could play into the psychological element of almost like a character reversal.
Yeah, do you want to talk about some of those specific visual choices, like the black and white, for instance?
Well, that decision was more or less to make the film black and white was first just in terms of evoking the period, because I knew I wanted this to play as a period piece. Although I knew that was going to be a major challenge from the onset, I knew I didn't want to take that challenge. But what was also really intriguing, right off the bat, I'm really a big silent film fan. And what's really fascinated me just from the aesthetics of silent film has to do with the objectivity of this relationship with visual impact. I mean, that was more or less through pure necessity, but we get our full information from whatever is textually presented to us, and we, as a viewer, establish it as text. And I thought, so maybe I can play with that in the facts that are going to be presented and broken down to the film. So the idea of having the text play along with the visuals was more or less first as a disjoint, so the viewer can identify both sources of information and try to draw their own conclusions from it. The first half, the silent part was also played as a disjoint, just so they can concentrate on whatever they're seeing, but also to have further down the road the reintroduction of sound, like the character's dialogue, to bring us back into reality. And when making this a psychological drama, I was also very drawn towards German expressionism. I knew right off the bat I wanted that visual style to play within the film. One actual piece that was a big inspiration both in cinematography, on scène, and also camera blockers was Carlo Breyer's Vampire, which isn't exactly a silent film, but it does draw a lot of the aesthetics. I mean, Carlo Breyer was a silent film director. He had, if your viewers know, directed The Passion of Joan of Arc and several different German French films. And what's interesting about his visual style is it's very pointed. It's very it brings the human character into very interesting nexus, and also kind of plays along with the stages of these on set. And the whole intention of the film was to kind of bring the framing both through the actual 4:3 ratio and the framing of the staging to become more claustrophobic, as if your whole world is kind of engrossing around it, to say the least. So that was something that was really kept in mind throughout the entire
Yes, I think that comes across very in so many of the different visual choices. It's very cool, very very effective. And so, could you take us back to production, the process of production, specifically who was involved in the making of the Judgment, and how did they impact the work? Maybe did the concept change at all during the process?
Well, right off the bat, I knew that this was going to be a very lengthy production, or at least the original intention was for the film to be at least 20 minutes, because the original screenplay was 20 minutes. And I had intended for pre-production to last those first few months. Just because this was my Division 3 and I was working around this through the school semester. So that first semester was just over 3 months, and then I had to go back. I'm actually from the Chicagoland area, so I went back then, and then the next semester would be more towards post-production. So first semester, pre and pre-production, the actual filming, and then the last semester, post-production. That didn't happen at all. Just because there was so much in pre-production that had to be figured out, just because the goals were so, even for being a small location-based film that only really had, like, on paper, 3 locations, but actually in reality was more like 5. Exactly, if I see the bridge. So the main thing that needed to be worked out was trying to bring this into period. Because I'm working with like a small amount of resources, so little time, in Western Massachusetts in 2015, 2016, which is a completely different world. So first things first, I had to do a fair amount of research trying to bring this into a certain time period. Luckily enough, I was able to get a fair good amount of resources, both through my Division 3 co-chair, Alicia Ellis, also looking through old family archives, doing research on turn of the century 1910 culture, like Central European culture, going back to topics, personal timelines. But the major aspect of that would involve finding locations to shoot this. Luckily enough, there are like a ton of different historical places around Western Massachusetts and Hampshire County, which is like really, really, I was just really fortunate to be in those sort of spaces. And when talking to my colleagues, there are a lot of living spaces in Amherst and like Northampton and Hadley and Easthampton that definitely could fulfill those roles. They just need a little bit of working with, but they could definitely work. And when like communicating my intentions with my other colleagues, I was able to find those spaces. Like the space that was shot for New York Special was actually the living space for a friend of mine, Annie Cochran's apartment. She was living in downtown Amherst, which was like very, very close to Amherst Cinema, just behind it actually. And although the power with cinema is that you can combine 2 different spaces and combine them into one, which I've always loved personally. So I figured with the dish points, it would only make sense to make the father's room much more dynamic, much more harsh, much more something that has so much more history in its aesthetic and feeling. And I had another friend in Collins, Don Porapod, that I knew lived in this really like cool living space just filmmaker, local filmmaker in the Hampton area, and also was working on his Division 3 at the time. And he lived in Hampton, and we were able to find a space in that house that worked but better than I ever had. The space with a friend actually was in East London, in Eastworks. So we were able to get some location of that. And the bridge, of course, is the Calvin Cleveland Bridge. That's off of Route 9. And yeah, we had considered working with like other different spaces, but I could find a bridge that would work better. Which kind of drew a major problem or issue, kind of like how are we going to coordinate this shot of your veteran falling off the bridge to his death. Which kind of brings us into casting. Which is, of course, working as a Division 3, I had to learn a lot of different things, including like major casting. Like in previous projects, I have worked mostly with friends, but not professional actors. And I knew, especially for the father's character, I wanted to find someone who's older who would be able to fulfill the role in a realistic way. First, I had drawn a listing through Craigslist, and got a few different responses from there. But what actually really helped was a resource called Actors of Western Massachusetts through Facebook. And I'm still attached to them. They're still really great trying to find work. If you are like an actor around that area, with the New York area, it's just an incredible resource. Finding students or independent filmmakers who need work, or just actors who are willing to help out. And luckily enough, I was able to find Gershon Eigner, who plays the father. The other roles, the friend was played by Carlo Brady, who's actually a friend of mine, but was just kind of intrigued by the story. But yeah, when trying to find funding and interest in the film, a lot of people were drawn to the idea of adapting a pop visual story just by the fact he's from Kafka, and of course, garnered a lot of reputation, and rightly so. He's probably one of the best writers in the last 100 years. Yeah, personally. And Carlo just played the role right off the bat. He's not an professional actor anyway, but of course, physically, he just nailed it out of the park. And also the role of the fiance, Brady film, was played by another friend, Rachel Cowen, who also worked as the makeup artist, costume, also worked in costuming and several different production assistant roles. But also, when I was, another thing about making this bringing this into period involved a lot of gathering different resources. So I had to work with a ton of different facilities throughout the area, including the college, anthropology theatrical department. They were a huge help in trying to find set pieces and costuming, but then again, I also had to find a lot through just the local Goodwills and Salvation Armies and secondhand stores. I think like every week of that first few months involved me like just digging through the secondhand stores to find whatever worked or didn't work. But after I gained some attention and I was ready to bring this into production, luckily I was able to find like a phenomenal team. Of course, like people were interested in the story, and whoever was interested was more interested in reading the story than reading the script, or at least reading them together, surprisingly enough. But yeah, my assistant director was Graciela Rodriguez Carmona. Ezekiel Baskin played the role of production manager. Both Walter Farms and Kobe Left played in good, sizable role to the cinematography department. Yeah, Rachel played a huge role in makeup, costuming, production assistant. And I was able to find like a large number of production assistants here and there. Name a few: W. Gear, Tasha Backup, forgive me, well enough. And also like my friends here and there. Michael Darrow also played a huge role, and he's my best friend. But the whole production involved a whole lot, mainly a whole lot of set decorations here and there, reconstruction, setting up before the night before, getting everything together. Luckily enough, we had all of our cameras here planned out. We shot the entire film on my Black and Magic pocket cinema camera. And what's nice about that, it shoots with a super 16mm sensor. And that helps definitely bring it into my 16mm feel. The workflow was really nice in order to bring the black and white aesthetic to up the contrast and make it look almost like Triax reversal. But we were also able to use Bolex Pellier lenses. And if you've ever used those before, they're incredibly sharp. Yeah, they're incredibly sharp. And they were perfect with a 4:3 ratio, which right off the bat I knew I was going to do. Yeah, main production, we were able to shoot a few different test shots in December of 2015. Actual production started late January when we all got back to school. We originally intended to shoot, I want to say 6 weeks, but of course that didn't happen. Mainly because there were a lot of different things that needed to be shot. Beforehand, one thing I really liked that's incredibly helpful for me is like reading detailed storyboards. And what was useful actually bringing that into the field was everything was broken down shot by shot. So we knew exactly what we needed to shoot, when we, like how much we could shoot, and what else needed to be done the next following day. But with that ended up being several shots long. I think the grand total was planned was around 150 shots. Yeah. That might have been a fair amount within 6 weeks, let alone. So ended up being more like 3 months.
Wow.
And the thing about everyone is that we're all full-time students. So partially, like, the cinematographer had to be out early, so someone else had to play that role. Various people played with recording sound. Various people played the role of plates. Various people played the role of lighting. And that was kind of one of the major reasons that I had decided to take up the role of York Benjamin, because I could work with my own time.
Yeah, could you tell us a bit about your method with starring in the Judgement while also directing and having written the adaptation and dealing with all of the fun things of student independent filmmaking?
Yeah, it involved a lot of pre-planning, just because bringing everything onto set and also dealing with like a huge amount of chaos, to say the least. As a director, and also I guess the producer too, you have to accommodate for that. So, pre-planning, I knew with the storyboard what needed to be blocked. Gershon and I actually spent a significant amount of time doing rehearsals, dress rehearsals, just to get down the block, establish what had to be done, who needs to move where, what each person needed to do in order to make the shooting like much more consistent. But like while playing the role, and also you have to be in the mindset of both the director and the character too, so that involves a lot of back and forth and knowing like when to break.
Could you tell? Oh, no, you go ahead. You go ahead. If there's more to say.
But yeah, it required a fair amount of work, but you're able to get through it.
It's
Sorry.
oh no, it's okay. I think that the challenge of the acting both with and without speech, it's, I don't know, the acting within the film is really incredible. And it's so interesting to hear that the dad character, I could have sworn that would be one of the characters who you knew before shooting, instead of having to sort of track down through.
No, I entered actually through pre-rehearsals, which is weird because it sounds like a lot of people have noticed like we look similar, kind of.
It works. Yeah, for the role it totally works.
But I give a lot of credit to Gershon because he's such a fantastic actor. He's really like very easy to work with. Or at least he's very generous. Generous as a performer, like both in rehearsals and on set. So I've got to give a lot of credit to him.
Could you tell us about the score and the musical composition?
So I know right off the bat I wanted the score to emphasize this tonal change, especially once we are kind of engrossed in George's story and the breakdowns of his world. So the idealistic tones, the closest, thinking back to like classical music here, I just kind of considered what is the most ideal in classical music, and that's Bach. I don't know what I'm not too sure what made that final choice. I know that when making test footage, just to show my division through trick groups as well as my the chairs, Abraham Levette, and Lucy Ellis had to show them something. So I originally had Yo-Yo Ma's Font Suite playing in the background because, hey, why not? They're beautiful. But beforehand, I had another friend, Charles Riker Oren, who I took a class with at UNF from Polish cinema. And that was the same time I was taking a pasta class. We had a lot of conversations about pasta. And I had told him my ideas for my big priest was really interested and mentioned he was cellist. So I figured, this could work. And going back to a lot of people reaching out to be involved in the project, Eigner also reached out to me through word of mouth. And he helped out with various other instrumental work, like through the piano. I think there were also a few violin pieces as well. And yeah, the score was mostly Charlie's rendition of certain Bach sarabands, but also a lot of improvisation, especially towards the scenes when we moved into the father's room. That was mostly drawn from improv sessions. And the movements were like going forward from different motifs that were kind of discovered through improv sessions. So that was like a really interesting collaboration get together. And once everything was together, the soundtrack was compiled the best way that was possible and the end product of the film.
Very cool. The cello, I love the cello. So
it turned out really well. Yeah. And a lot of, you gotta give a lot of credit to Charlie there. But also a lot of the intro that during the first scene was kind of reworking of those sarabands. So all improvisation.
So, the film is now, well, almost 6 years old. Time really flies. What do you think watching it now? What stands out? What is it like watching something 6 years later?
I think it's incredible. It's insane. It almost seems like it's yesterday, but it's not. Just in terms of how much has changed in my personal life, but also like what happened. So since then, I more or less moved into photography, but I've been doing a lot of writing, and I'm actually going to be moving into a new production that should take place sometime next year.
Tell us about that.
Sure. I'm currently working on a short film called The Tunnel, which is loosely based on the Orpheus Eurydice myth, taking place in modern times. So, character has recently lost his wife and is trying to contact her through the death, but from the grave. And then he meets someone, meets a guy at a bar, and who actually knows the passageway to the afterlife. But through then, he has to decide whether to engage in, to leave everything behind and his responsibilities as a father, or else to proceed in even more uncertain death. So, a bit different, still goes into the dark themes, similar to the Judgement, but hopefully that will be in production sometime next year. been pushed back several years because of the pandemic, but we'll just have to wait and see.
Well, it's cool to hear that we are working on something new, and hopefully you'll bring it to us on Focus Locus when it's done too. I think that's all of my questions. Is there anything else that you wanted to sort of reflect on 6 years post the finishing of the Judgment?
Sure. I mean, when looking back on the film, there's a lot that should be changed. I definitely think the pacing could be much more quicker. But I mean, that's just like personal critique on like judgment from my younger self or something. But to be honest, the film's final product. Gotta leave it at that.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on Focus Locus, Connor. Thank you everyone for watching. Do you want to give a sign off? Do you want to say goodbye to our audience? Sorry about that.
Thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed the film.
All right. Good night, everybody, and I will see you next week.